Why exactly was the cartoon for Deke's Ghostbusters called The Real Ghostbusters? Was this just a legal action, or were there deeper purposes for this title? We'll be looking into what real means to the world of the Ghostbusters right after this Mondo Radical cover of their theme song by my pig Jiggy. Take it away, little buddy! Oh, wow, friends, my musical ham never ceases to amaze me. He learned that on his own. That was the Ghostbusters theme by Jiggy da Piggy. If you missed it, catch the rewind. It's worth it. He's quite talented. My name's Cade, your favorite cartoon weirdo, and together we rewind to the tunes of yesterday in the 80s and 90s to find a new perspective for your life nowadays. And real quick, just to let everyone here know, we are brought to you by the fine folks of the Cereal Box Network, cerealboxnetwork.com. Our special guest today is Marqus, but everybody calls him Marky Mark with a Q because it's cooler. And that's actually how it's spelled. Nita Rooney. By day, he's a major brand designer working for many prestigious clients, but in the evening, he morphs into a super collector of action figures and collectibles of all kinds, reviewing them on YouTube as a part of Superqool with a Q because it's cooler. He's a nostalgia fueled single dad with the heart of a child. Give it up for Marqus! Hiya, Mark!
Hey, what's up? Can you hear me all right?
I can hear you. Oh, wow. That's such swag. You're repping the brand,
Yeah, I
man.
came I came ready today.
Let's make you front and center here. That's a
There you go.
Ghostbusters hat. I
Got a
dig it.
Ghostbusters hat, a snapback. I like my brims nice and flat, and I got a nice 80s tees Ghostbusters t-shirt from the brand 80s tees.
That is excellent. And you even did a little plug there. Are you sponsored?
No, I'm not sponsored. I when I need 80s stuff, I go to 80s tees.
No, we got to say that for YouTube nowadays. If you don't say it.
I know. Oh yeah, that's true. That's true.
But that's cool, man. That is really cool. You back up one more time. Let's see it full frame. Let's see your shirt.
Oh, here
There
we
we
go.
go. That's cool. This is a little
Show
kind of
show
like
off the
paint dust on there
Ghostbusters and
too.
the guns.
Ghostbusters and the guns.
Or
That's
should I
nice.
say the proton blasters?
Yeah, I think they were called proton guns at one point in the show, but they kind of switched definitions a little bit. It's like proton throwers, proton guns, but basically you light them up, you find a ghost, you take them down. All right, and Commotion Crew in the live chat, thank you so much for joining us. Let's get there and see who's joining us tonight. Hiya, Sherry Edgin. Hey, yo, love you, Jiggy. Callie Hawkins, go, Jiggy, go. Random Facebook user is saying applause.
Yes,
That's
applause.
thank you very much. They're probably in the Commotion Crew Facebook group. So if you're not over there, check that out. We do have a Facebook group. Alfredo! Hi, Alfredo! Hey, I'm here just in time for my friend's stream. Yes! Thank you for joining us. Long time no see. Hi again. He's saying, who you gonna call? Ghostbusters. Exactly. Simply amazing cartoon commotion, Sherry Engine says. Thank you very much. Sherry Engines also says, hiya, Mark.
Howdy.
And Alfredo says, hi, Mark.
Hiya.
They're actually doing it. They're dropping the hiya in the chat. That's good to see.
Right, and they're getting it right. The Marcus with the Q.
That's cool because it's cooler.
Who are you gonna call? Cartoon commotion. There you go.
Who are you going to call cartoon commotion? How
We
about,
would we would also accept busting makes me feel good from
yes.
the
Everybody, drop that in the chat anytime you want. Bustin' makes me feel good. Alrighty, so now before we get started, we do have one thing we gotta do, and that is the breakdown. I'm gonna pop up a picture of the show here, the intro to the Real Ghostbusters, and I've got breakdown music. All right. The Real Ghostbusters had 7 seasons, airing from September 13th, 1986 to October 5th, 1991. But nobody liked the seasons after the first 2 anyways. The series is based off of the live-action Ghostbusters and underwent some legal frustration with Filmation and their own Ghostbusters, but we'll get to that a bit later. This show does a fantastic job of animating the continuing adventures of Peter Venkman, Winston Zeddemore, Ray Stantz, and Egon Spangler, Janine, and there's the addition of Slimer as a companion. Even with a cartoonish sidekick, it never felt like it wrote down to the audience, at least not in those first 2 seasons. It might also be worth mentioning that Season 2 is 65 episodes long, so you almost get an entire series worth of quality before ABC came in and ruined everything with Q5. But again, more on that later. All right, Jiggy has our transition. Jiggy, are you ready with that? Friends, prepare yourselves because this is our main topic. Okay, working in reverse, let's talk about episode 11 first, Citizen Ghost. The episode that explains the changes from the first movie to the animated series. Let's see, I do have some screenshots of that. Here we go, this is a big showdown moment. These are the People Busters on the left, the glowing green ones. The focus of this episode explains why Slimer is a part of their team, as a reporter comes to interview Peter on the brief history of the Ghostbusters so far. Peter tells her the story of how when they came back from their battle with Gozer in the first movie, their old uniforms were reeking with ectoplasmic energy, so they had to be destroyed. Luckily enough, their new uniforms came in while they were out. The old uniforms became the People Busters, hunting the boys down to replace them. Marky Mark, do you have any thoughts on this episode? What stood out to you on this episode?
Oh my God, so many things. So, since I'm a collector, it's interesting because not only does this tell the story or make that transition from cartoon and movie, but also those, they call them, I guess, the spectral Ghostbusters because they were in ghost form. Yeah, I believe so.
I often hear them called the People or Human Busters.
Well, they were sold through Diamond Select as a special 4-pack, I guess, as a San Diego Comic-Con version. And I believe they were called the Spectral or Spectre Ghostbusters. And they came all 4 with like a sort of small version of the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man.
Yeah, I remember seeing that set and wanting it, but now it's like super expensive.
Oh yeah, that thing is like going for at least $500. And the cartoon versions, the regular versions with the different colored uniforms, those things are going for anywhere from like $100 to $150 each on eBay and you know, any other sort of marketplace.
Wow.
It's crazy. That's the collector's game, you know. They're banking on someone's nostalgia and someone wanting it that bad that they'll pay that price.
Often I have to find those like middle class deals where it's just like it's not as good as the high end collector's item, but it meets the criteria.
Well, yeah, right. Sometimes you have to like write it off and say, oh, maybe the box is not in pristine condition, or maybe it's not in the box, or maybe it's missing some accessories, just so you can say you have the actual figure, right?
I at this point I'm doing substitutes. I get like the remakes of the Playmates, or were they Playmates?
No, it's Kenner.
Kenner. Yeah. I'm thinking Turtles.
yeah. Playmates is still around. Kenner came back because Hasbro, they took over Kenner, and now they're using that license to sell nostalgic figures like the Ghostbusters.
I got all 4 of the Busters and Stay Puft. I don't have Slimer at this point, but he's on the list. You don't have
the other Ghost? What is it, the eye-popping one?
No, I think they sold the toilet again, too.
Yeah, they sold the toilet monster. I don't know the official name.
The Ecto-1, so there's that. I do have that.
Awesome, yeah. They re-released the Nerf-styled Proton Blaster. I think they were supposed to release the Scary Granny. I'm not sure if that happened.
Oh, the Mrs. Rogers' Neighborhood?
No, I don't know if that was related to the cartoon, but they had this like scary granny that like her mouth opens up really wide or something like that.
Oh my, I swear. Yeah. We'll get into some nostalgic moments in a minute, but
yeah, episode 11, that's that kind of, you have to build, it's kind of funny, you have to build up to that. And then you get to episode 11 and it's like, oh, this is why.
But the reason I want to start with episode 11 is so that we get context, because a lot of that like sort of big realization moment happens here. I mean, it's a sort of dual episode thing with episode 10 as well, but we'll get to that in just a minute. Just a reminder, folks, if you at any time find yourself digging the show, use that like and share button down. Both are free ways that you can show that you care for this show, because we make this show for you, Commotion Crew. Speaking of which, we got some more comments. Eric Grant is joining us tonight. Hello, everyone. Hiya, Eric. Hiya, Mr. B-Man. It was an interesting idea to get a hearse. Okay. Yeah, well, I mean, it fits the theme. I mean, they're the Ghostbusters, and that, deals with that theme. Sherry Edgen says Bussin' makes us feel good, along with Jiggy's banjo.
Hey.
Alfredo, hiya again. Are we gonna catch some ghosts? We might. We might before the night is over. There's a little bit more to go on here. Okay, so I think that even if we'd rather not mention it, this show's creative team knew that it had a lot to live up to in the Ghostbusters franchise from the movie. And just so you know, folks, Johnny Beyond Pica, the host of the network's flagship show Back of the Cereal Box, once told me that he didn't see the value of making a cartoon version of the Busters when the movies were already so good. And I can understand this perspective. But I think it's actually a misconception that this was meant to be an improvement or even mesh with the movies. To me, the reason that the cartoons were needed is to serve as an expansion of everything that was already established. This series gave us a way to really get to know these characters and take us on further, more unrealistic adventures in their cartoon environment. The Citizen Ghost episode made a hardcore move when in the defeat of the Human Busters. Let's bring that back up. This is the battle with the human Spectral Busters, you called them?
Yeah, Spectral Ghostbusters, or the Ghostbusters.
Most commonly perceived as People Busters, I guess. Well, in this defeat, we had Ray proclaiming, "We're the real Ghostbusters." That was the thing that he said right before they were captured. Now, I think this was meant to cement these characters that we're following here were the legit Busters of their universe and not just an extension of the movies. What about you, Marky Mark? Are you feeling this?
In terms of what?
Well, generally, just that statement alone was sort of a proclamation of their individuality, them being the real deal Ghostbusters.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I never thought about it that way, and I did double check. They're considered the Spectral Ghostbusters, but yeah, I mean, that kind of cements it all. Like if you put it together like that, there's the Ghostbusters, the Ghostbusters, and then there's the real Ghostbusters. But I think overall, based on what you said, the cartoon, let's face it, the cartoon was made so they could sell toys, and the cartoon is animated. The ghosts are more colorful. They're less, I guess, kind of creepy. We distinguish each character with a specific uniform, so it makes them stand out as an isolated individual versus being uniform. So the cartoon does things to make them more relatable to the younger audience, right? Let's face it, 1984, Ghostbusters came out. Ivan Reitman produced it. I mean, this is the guy responsible for Animal House. So it was meant for a more, adult audience. Meanwhile, the cartoon was meant to serve, to capitalize. Okay, we capitalize in the films with the adults. How do we get, the kids?
True.
And that's through cartoons and toys.
That's very true. Right on, right on. I'm thinking that if I can recall, there were people that explored the reason this was created. I probably remember it from another YouTube channel. One of the reasons they brought up that I can remember was that they wanted to be able to sell toys. So it was for toys, at least in the general conception of the series. But I think outside of that, the writers, they really went all in to make this a very special experience. I mean, they didn't write down to the kids. They made the ghosts threatening at times. There was actual frightening episodes with extreme situations. I have a picture here of the first episode with a giant... I mean, we're talking a ghost that was like, what was it, level 12? What did he call it? Was it level 12? I think it was. I'm
not quite sure, but that was the first episode. He was awoken from rubble.
Mm-hmm. And he inhabited all of these toys in a toy factory, and you're thinking, I mean, it's just toys, but he made them gigantic, and they started destroying this. It was like a Gozer-size event in the first episode, so I don't think the show ever truly catered to that audience in the sense that it was like just kiddie stuff. I think they definitely kept a lot of the serious and intense moments from Ghostbusters in their universe.
I think that seasons 1 and 2,
yes,
obviously they're trying to make that transition from adult to children. I mean, I think a lot of adults still chimed in and said, hey, Ghostbusters, I'm in. But you're right, the series brought us Sam Hain, the boogeyman. Just that episode alone, which one was it? With the trolls, where the troll wants to leave his troll world.
The troll bridge.
That episode alone with that weird punk troll and his voice there was
massive. And
and
that was interesting because it wasn't just another ghost trying to take over the world. They wanted to get the troll back. So
what was that episode with Ray where he goes back home? I think it's called Welcome Back Ray or something like that.
Yes. Yeah, he went back and then they fought the it's like a chupacabra, but it's winged.
But that was one of the one episodes where they addressed black magic and the dark arts.
Yeah, the guy that was back home wanted revenge and just automatically... Yeah. And the thing is, he openly admits to putting Ray down during his time being there before. So it's like, okay, so you're so petty that you're actually going to practice dark arts and try to make him look bad by making it to where he can't capture ghosts. I don't know. I think that was a bit low.
Yeah, and I mean, and speaking of not pandering or just catering to the children, the kids in the audience, which I guess is mainly intended for, that's deep stuff, dark arts, black magic books and stuff. So that's adult content,
Yeah, exactly. They never wrote it to where I think it was just so kid focused that adults couldn't appreciate it, and it was so adult that kids couldn't get into it. They met in the middle, and a lot of great 80s cartoons did that. A lot of great 90s cartoons did that too. Okay, so that is excellent. Ray's proclamation of being the real Ghostbusters was not the first time that this was done in the show. In fact, the show leads with an episode where the Busters are being impersonated by ghouls they captured who broke free to get revenge. Of course, I'm referencing that iconic moment where Janine deals with their phony baloney, telling people on the phone, no, we're the real Ghostbusters, not ghosts are us. This was our introduction to the animated world of the real Ghostbusters. That line was so very much intentional. Oh, I think that Jiggy has something to add here. What's up, buddy? Oh, yes, right, a Rooney, little buddy, but we're not quite ready to talk about their very real legal struggles. That's very insightful, but we'll get to that in a moment, okay? So getting back on track, Marky Mark, could you see the real trend all the way back in that first episode?
The real trend as far as what?
The real trend. The word, like, the intention of the use of the word.
Oh, yeah. So, it's funny because we talk about the film and we talk about the cartoon. Only the cartoon uses the words "the real Ghostbusters."
Mm-hmm.
The film doesn't. But both obviously were facing legal issues, which I guess we'll transition into.
We're getting.
But there's there's a reason for that. But obviously the cartoon, because I guess it's more content, they constantly, or not constantly, but they make sure that they let you know or explain why they are the real Ghostbusters versus the film is just Ghostbusters. They're unapologetic and they just, move forward. But yeah, you see it throughout the series. And it's funny you talked about that after season 2, you said, I guess the audience sort of like started dwindling.
It did, because season 2 is pretty much where it ended. Because, as we know, Q5 came in. But again,
that's right.
We're
almost
almost
there. I was
there.
going to mention that. Yeah,
we're
so
almost
Q5, Superqool with a Q, Q5, it's funny coincidence.
Well, I'm glad that you're not associated.
Yeah.
I think our entire audience is glad for that fact. So as a kid watching the show, though, did it surprise you that they were trying to say that these were the real Ghostbusters instead of, like, their real-world counterparts?
No, because, I used to watch the other Ghostbusters, too. I'm sure we're going to get to that. And I love that series, too. But the funny thing is, like, I associated the other cartoon by Filmation, the same people responsible for He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. I associated the other show as the Go Ghostbusters, and these the real Ghostbusters. And since there was a movie, I said, "Oh yeah, that makes sense. They are the real Ghostbusters,"
Okay.
But technically, they're not the real Ghostbusters.
Yes, technically they're not, and I think I like it because it's sort of trippy because you're watching a cartoon about a movie, which is the actual real life Ghostbusters, and the cartoon takes it and says, no, this is real. So it's just so perfect for them because in what other universe could that work very well?
That happens all the time. Like, for example, Filmation went through the same thing with He-Man. He-Man was a result of a failed license with Conan. And they had all these sketches and all these concepts like, well, we can't let this go, so what do we call it? And they turned it into He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, and they got sued for that too.
Right, I remember in a marketing meeting when they were pitching the show, I think it was people came by and they were like, and it was like what was the guy that actually played Conan? He come by and he's like, this looks like our thing, not their thing, so... But then they redid a few things on He-Man, I think, and it got through. So,
yeah, where there's a will, there's a way, right? It just takes a lot of this,
Righty-o. So the whole Ghosts R Us business was a really clever way, though, I think, to emphasize that in this world, you are following the real deal Ghostbusters.
Yeah.
And it was expanded on even more in episode 10, Take 2. But before we move on to that episode, let's take a moment to talk about Janine. All right, I've got a screenshot of Janine here. Not just the one where she's answering the phone here, but also one where she's dressed as a Ghostbuster.
Right, the Genie episode.
Well, this one in particular was not the Genie episode. This one is from the Sandman episode.
Oh, okay.
So, bringing up Q5 again, I know her character was drastically altered by ABC and Q5 in those later seasons. During the first 2 seasons, we got a lot of character development out of her. She starts out as someone who's just basically there to get paid and answer the phones, but it's she becomes a major team player. And not to mention, it's evident right away that she had a major crush on Egon Spangler. Friends in the live chat, do you think that Egon and Janine made a good couple? And Marky Mark, what do you think of Janine's character? What did you think of Janine's character in the show and how she was represented? Before the changes, Janine. I should specify.
Yeah. I don't know. I guess because, I remember all of the Ghostbusters, and recently I started binge watching. once you have a character in your mind, and whether they start from here and end up over there, you capture the essence of that character. I never felt like she was just like a receptionist or just like there to answer the phones. I grew up in New York, so I loved that Janine Melnitz's sass, that New York flavor
She had
that
spunk.
they gave her. Yes, and like that to me always stood out. Like, a good film, a good cartoon, you have to have layers, right? Just like any good song as well, it has to have. You have to have that little background music, like what we have here. You have to
by
have
popular demand, I should say.
There you go. You have to have these layers because all those layers make for a beautiful cake, right? Like you don't want a cake with just one layer. So whether like if she first started off as just like the cliche sort of receptionist, all the way to the genie episode, the Sandman episode, because she had to take over because everyone was falling prey to that Sandman spell. We always knew that Janine had that in her,
Yeah, she has more character than just that face value.
Exactly. So that to me, I always knew she had it in her, so it was no surprise. But I always, even in the film, you kind of like only got this much of her, but you always knew there was more to her than just Ghostbusters, we have one.
Okay, that's actually a really good impression. I love it. I absolutely love it.
But I love that in the movie. Remember, she's like, "We got one."
Yeah. But I completely understand, because that's exactly what I was thinking, is that in the show, in the cartoon, we are allowed more time to get to know these characters better. They're just their personalities. You get to spend time with them and get to learn how they interact and what they care about and what they don't care about. Like in this, I mean, right from the beginning, she was written to pursue a relationship with Egon. I mean, and it works very well, because it's got this sort of like, you're not so sure how intelligent she is, and then you've got this like major IQ. I love one of his responses. She just like says something to him like, "Oh, Egon, you're so smart," and he's just as bland as can be, just straightforward. I know.
always deadpan.
Deadpan, but it's the best. It's the best, and Maurice LaMarche does his voice, and it's so perfect. It's always deadpan. Now, before we get into a little bit more of Janine, let's check in with the live chat. How's everyone doing? We got Eric Grant talking to Sherry Edgin. How you doing, Eric? Dave's Dimension. Okay, wait, we got a couple comments here from Dave's Dimension. The first comment here is personal. The Real Ghostbusters was the perfect... So personally, this is his opinion, was the perfect way to introduce the Ghostbusters to kids. And while some were cheesy ghosts, other stories kept kids, teens, and adults hooked in. Completely agree.
Do you have his other post before that?
Oh, no, this is after, actually.
Okay. All right, there you go.
Dave's continues, with monsters, ghosts, and demons, like, you know what? Real quick, side note, I do like that they weren't always just ghosts. They would occasionally pursue other creatures, like the Boogeyman and Sam Hain, and, well, Sam Hain was a ghost. But then,
which one was Grendel? I don't remember Grendel.
I've got to get off track there for a minute. But yeah, Boogeyman here, and then Sandman. They were not all just ghosts, like trolls. The trolls, for example, they having to deal with them. So he says also, there's an episode where the Ghostbusters find themselves facing off against the People Busters, which was episode 10. Oh no, 11. Yes, Citizen Ghost. Was that 10 or 11? I'm getting mixed up here.
Citizen Ghost is 11.
Thank you. And Callie Hawkins says, hey Eric, glad you made it. Dave's Dimension says, with writers like Jay Straczynski, yes, who would later write and showrun Babylon 5. They had a ton of creative talent writing these episodes. That's very true.
And not just writing the episodes, starring in the episodes. Arsenio Hall was Winston Zedmore.
Yeah, you got some more notes on that?
Yeah, I mean, Arsenio Hall is famous, he's famous for being Eddie Murphy's best friend. He's in several films. He had his own talk show for a long time. He was the epitome of the 90s. And then you had Dave Coulier took over
He did.
Lorenzo Music, correct? You know,
He
Mr.
did.
Dave cut it out.
Lorenzo Music, though. Well, I have a note on that a little while later. So, Heads or Tails is popping in
Lorenzo
here.
Music's Garfield, so.
Yes.
Yeah.
we have some things to talk about there. Heads or Tails says hi. They're all just kind of saying hiya to everybody. Hiya, people. If you got some notes on what we're talking about, go ahead and drop them in the comments section. This is live, and it will be featured in the podcast. Okay, so now Janine, back to Janine. Her first foray, as we showed on screen here, in her Ghostbusters outfit, was in that Sandman episode where he attempted to put everyone into a 5-year sleep and bring dreams to life. Winston got her to dream about becoming a Ghostbuster, and with her help, they took down the Sandman. There's a couple things here that we got to talk about. First, we know that in the Boogeyman Cometh episode, their equipment couldn't work on him because he wasn't really a ghost. So, Marky Mark, in your opinion, was the Sandman a ghost?
What would the Sandman be? He's just like, if let's even say we touch upon Sandman from the Dark Horse comics, or it's an entity? I don't know. I guess the answer is no.
But it could also be yes, because they captured him. They captured him in the trap. I have a visual of them capturing him in the trap right here.
I mean, yeah, eventually they trap everything.
Well, in the Boogeyman Cometh episode, they actually had to blow up his dimension to trap him in there. So I guess it's a form of trap.
Yeah, that, to me personally, I love the Boogeyman episode. Well, not only does it introduce, like, you know, a worthy opponent for the Ghostbusters, but we start to get, you know, we talked about that what the cartoon does is it helps develop each character even more. And obviously in this episode, we see that Egon, for the first time, we see him come out of this deadpan character and have some feeling, because obviously we come to figure out that he's had a connection with this monster or demon, whatever you want to call him, in his past.
Yeah, something
so you're
he
like,
encountered
oh,
as
wow.
a child.
Yes, so that's why he's like, you know, in his, you know, typical Egon voice, like, not again, never more. You know, like.
You do some pretty good impressions of these guys. I'm just gonna have you voice them tonight.
There you go. But yeah, so like that Boogeyman episode, it allows us to get to know Egon more and make Egon come out of character. And to me, that's special. It's like, now watching it as an adult, I'm like, oh my god! Like as a kid, you're like, oh cool, like a new bad guy and my favorite characters. But as an adult, you're like, oh wow, like, you know, this is what's finally made Egon come out of his box, you know?
Right. He had more development. He shared that history with us, and that's another thing. It's just like you said, showing that history gives us more depth to the character, gives us more time with them. And the show really did that. We have some comments, but go ahead.
I was going to say something real quick. Another beautiful thing about the episode, let's remember, this is from the 80s. You know, I think in today's world, interracial relationships, or, you know, just the racial divide in general today is less abrasive as it was in the 80s. Let's not forget, you know, we were having the civil rights movements in the late 60s, late 60s, the 70s, you know, everyone's trying to come together. So the 80s was that time where it's kind of like, let's see if all this that we've done as a society is working. So it was beautiful to see that the story was about these two African-American kids going through this problem with the boogeyman. And here you have, you know, this Caucasian figure, Egon, who looks as Aryan as can be, because they didn't make him look like, you know, Harold Ramis. They gave him blonde hair, blue eyes. And here he is defending these kids that are of different, you know, class system, a different race. And it was just beautiful to see that human story, you know? Very true.
Very true. And I know that these weren't written for us to overthink. But it's just sort of what I do. It's what I do. I overthink these cartoons for fun. So my thinking is, you know, getting back to the book, Sandman, he'd have to be a ghost because they couldn't capture the boogeyman. because he wasn't a ghost. But this guy they did trap. And, you know, I'm wondering in the live chat, friends in the live chat, Commotion Crew, was the Sandman a ghost? Is he a ghost? Let us know. We got Marky Mark saying no. You got me saying yes. It's not a war, but I'm curious. What do you think? Was the Sandman a ghost, or was he not? Yeah, and the Boogeyman, the development for their characters is just incredible. The other thing we got in this was some more character growth for Winston Zeddemore. He had a groovy quote when the Sandman asked him, "Wouldn't the world be a better place if it were filled with dreams instead of people?" He came back with, "But the whole reason people dream is so that they can try and make their dreams come true."
Hey, that's right.
That is some pretty motivational stuff right there. That's another thing. And just like with Janine, this show gave us more time with Winston. And it's the same deal. And he showed a lot of love to those kids in that Boogeyman episode too. He came back just to defend them.
Yep.
I'm gonna bring it back though to our real and unreal talk. So just a moment ago, I almost started talking about episode 10 again. That's take 2. And that's coming up here in a second. But first, we should address the fact that this was basically a 2-parter. Episode 12 feels like the follow-up to this one. 12 explored the origins of the Busters, but this episode is where we learned that, at least in their universe, the movies are based off of them, and they are the real Ghostbusters, okay? So let's show that on screen real quick. This is actually the Ghostbusters going to see their own movie in universe. Now, I know the immediate knee-jerk reaction is like, no, they're not the real Ghostbusters. They're based off of the real Ghostbusters. But this is, like I said earlier, this is so perfect. Because in our world, the cartoon is based off of the movie. And in their world, the movie is based off of them in the cartoon. So no matter how you phrase it, they complement each other's existence so perfectly. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah.
Marky Mark.
Yeah, it's funny that there's always this like sort of, the movie's a movie, but the cartoon has the freedom to mock the movie or play off the movie. Obviously, at the end of the day, the cartoon has the ability to have fun. Have fun, poke at the movie, say, no, we're the real Ghostbusters. I don't look like that, you know? And it's you know, I mean, when you have a writer that went on to do Babylon 5, I mean, that makes total sense, you know?
He did a great job writing. He came back to try to fix what they did to Janine in the later seasons, but unfortunately, even his writing talent could not save the later seasons of the show. Okay, well, right on, man. I just love how perfectly strange it is that their writing emphasizes how they are genuine. They're the real thing, and the film is based off of them. That this wasn't the only cartoon to do this, but they did it first, and to me, that made the show even more unique. It really did.
Well, I'm sure they did that as well because they had no clue there was probably a Ghostbusters 2 coming, because they didn't come anytime soon.
That's true. That's true. They had a lot to work off in the first film, and they didn't necessarily need the second, another foray into ghostbusting to figure it out. They went on original adventures, and they took you further than the first movie could. All right, Jiggy, strum that banjo. The next thing we've just got to talk about is... Like Jiggy had mentioned earlier, there were legal reasons for the real Ghostbusters. See, Filmation once tried to sue Columbia Pictures for the title of Ghostbusters, for the first movie. They didn't get a fair deal out of it on their end, so Lou Scheimer, head of Filmation, made sure there was a clause written into the agreement between them and Columbia that they couldn't produce a cartoon simply called Ghostbusters. So the word real was also on top there as a legal loophole. And some people probably believed that that word was a proverbial slap in the face to Filmation, but the way the show was written, actually, now I believe that it suggests that the animated series was indeed supposed to be seen as the real versions of themselves and not the other way around. But I want to know your take on this, Marky Mark. What do you think about all of that?
I think it was a slap to the face.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, I think that, so there was already a ghost, so I guess the real Ghostbusters, not the Kenner one or the cartoon one with Lorenzo Music and Arsenio Hall, based on the film. There was a Ghostbusters live action show complete with Gorilla and two older gentlemen.
That's true.
And then they created the cartoon.
Right.
Well, I think the film was based off that live action show.
The film came first, just before the cartoon, and I'm talking about Filmation's cartoon here. We got a screenshot here of the cartoon. Just
that's the cartoon.
The early day. They added a few more characters, and I know
that gorilla was in the live action show.
And these two, it a film? No, it's the show, and these two are the descendants of the originals in the original show.
There you go. Okay.
I do not know their names. I know the gorilla is Tracy. And Tracy. Anybody in the comments, feel free to correct me on their names. The other two, because I have no idea. But Tracy the gorilla.
Bad guy, the bad guy was Primeval. I remember
Primeval. That's correct. I do know him. I see. For this show, I think the reason that this show really didn't take this cartoon really didn't take off was because the first episode alone kind of tries to do too much all at once, just kind of throws everything at the wall to see what sticks. And I mean that quite literally. They did so many villains, so many characters, so many situations. Like for example, the main plot of at least the first few episodes takes place in the future, where the ghost has already somehow conquered time and destroyed the original Ghostbusters. It's a lot for me to wrap my head around, just as a casual viewer even. So I feel like that was a deterrent, and the other show, The Real Ghostbusters, kind of took off for that reason. Now, you say that Real was added as a slap in the face. I slightly disagree, just because of everything we've uncovered here. The writing alone was aimed to make us believe that these characters were indeed real, as opposed to their real-world counterparts. Not this show specifically. And I did call up Craig Miller, who was a writer for this show, and he specifically was completely unaware that there was any sort of rivalry going on between their Studio Deke and Filmation. And it was his claim that all of the writers there knew nothing of it. So my theory, at least Jiggy and me, our theory is that they wrote it with the real stuff so that their stories would be taken as seriously as the movies, and not just to say that they were real and Filmation's wasn't. But it is totally understandable that you might think that they were joking at their expense. Let's check in with the Commotion crew in the audience and see what they have to say. Let me get this picture off screen. Let's check in with the Commotion crew and see what they have to say about this. Mr. B-Man says we'll need a gorilla. Tack the Artist Cat says Ghostbusters the animated series works as a title too. Yeah, it could have. So Real might have been added specifically for this purpose and not just as a legal workaround. I am watching Gotcha Man. Okay, that's nice. Julian Murray says, I do suppose. Oh, I think he's having a conversation with Sherry Edgin. I'm not sure. Julian Murray, pop in here, Jay. I want to hear your take on this. Do you think that maybe this is the reason they added that? Or is it because of the legal, does it seem more likely the legal reason? Signature King says, howdy do, fellow nerds.
Howdy do.
Howdy do, Signature King. Glad you could join us. George Bueller, how you doing, George? He has a show on the Cereal Box Network called Fanatic Forums, so check him out. He's on every Friday night at 7 p.m. And next week, we're going live and we're talking about G.I. Joe. So I'm glad you could make it, George. He says Jake Kong Jr. and Eddie Spencer. Okay, so those are the names of the two in that picture with Tracy the Gorilla.
Wow, I didn't know that, yeah.
Now, Julian Murray, Jay, my friend Jay, says that it seems possible that it could be for the legal reasons. And yeah, I totally agree. It does seem possible. Facebook user, I do not see your name, so hiya. I'm glad you could join us. Probably in the Commotion Crew Facebook group.
So this is another reason why I think it's a slap to the face. Outside of talking nerd talk, geekdom, collecting, nostalgia, I'm in brand design. And
that's true.
A big part of helping a client trademark their brand, all it takes is one little slight spin-off to help legalize that. So for example, I went through a situation where a client had a name and it ended in sort of in a feminine form, like ending in, so for example, there's in Spanish, if it's a female, it ends with A, and if it's male, it's O. That represents, like, male dominant. So it was very simple. Like the word was vegano, that means vegan in Spanish. Vegano means that I'm a male vegan. Vegana means that I'm a female vegan. Now, when you trademark, you use different classifications. Like if you're selling t-shirts, I don't know off the top of my head, but let's just say this classification code 023. And if you're selling cookbooks, let's just say it's classification 046. The fact that it was spelled in the female way and it was a different classification, that was enough for her to get that trademark.
Okay.
So, I think that when they put the real Ghostbusters and not just Ghostbusters, that was their way of saying, ha, gotcha.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's highly likely that it was for the legal reasons.
Yeah.
And definitely possible, because what we're looking at here is a name, like you said, just kind of like tacked on there just to give it a little bit more individuality. And then there's the clause in the contract, so
Exactly.
They couldn't do it if they didn't have something to distinguish themselves from the other Ghostbusters with the gorilla.
That's right.
So I can understand that. I guess I want to believe that this was true because of the conversation that I had with Craig Miller. I'm inclined to believe it at this point because of that conversation. He broke it down to where he explained that everyone he worked with, at least in that writers group, they knew nothing of this rivalry. And I had previously looked into the rivalry myself, just aside from this, and I had discovered so many things that they had done to kind of like poke fun at the other show later on.
Yeah.
But that is pretty much where that's going to end. We have another subject to bring up now.
All right, yeah. I was gonna say there's a difference between what the writers knew and what the lawyers knew. So
that's true. But
let's not forget, busting makes me feel good.
What I'm thinking about though is how the writers wrote it in, because like we're talking about this entire video is talking about what real means in the Real Ghostbusters. Now that word was emphasized for a reason. So the writers either knew something or they were doing it for a purpose, because it's not just one reference. I've brought up at least 4 times that they've emphasized the word real within this show. So it's something to think about. It might be more than just a legal reason. And that's what we're pretty much discussing tonight.
But what's the easiest way to sell something? By constantly repeating, constantly showing it to you.
That's true. Okay, so that's a good angle right there. That's a good argument, because if they could like repeat it often, then that would be the term that you could be looking for to find the toys.
Yep.
I couldn't imagine how many people going to the store for their kids to buy Ghostbuster toys wound up coming home with a gorilla.
That's true.
I mean, can you picture them? They want the Ecto 1, but they get that jalopy.
Well, or like, this is not the werewolf I wanted from the Ghostbusters toys.
Grandpa, Grandma, I wanted Ghostbusters. You got me this weird jalopy, and the eyes are not popping out of the toilet bowl. So obviously this is the wrong toy line.
Well,
I need you to take me to the store to get the right toys.
Well, it's funny because the Ghostbusters Filmation one of the bad guys was a werewolf with like sneakers and like a weird Jetson outfit.
Oh boy.
And then later down the road, Ghostbusters did a Universal Monsters line where they had a Dracula, a Frankenstein, and a werewolf. That werewolf today is like a hot item.
Wow. So like, by hot item, what are we looking at in price wise?
I mean, if you find it loose and in decent condition, maybe 45. If you find it mint on the blister and card, you're looking at 150, 200, maybe 300. It all depends.
Oh, we're talking loose versus carded. Carded, yeah. 300?
Yeah, it can. It's like the stock market. One month is this, 1 month is down. You know, it's like,
yeah, that's true. I mean, I know the Creeper Scooby-Doo pop is over 500 at this point.
Yeah, but if you're a real collector, you're gonna get one for loose, one to rock, one to stock, and one to shock, something like that.
One to rock, one to stock, one to shock. Wait, how do you shock with the third one?
So loose is to rock,
right?
To stock, you keep it, so it could accrue value. You keep it minty fresh, and to shock means that you're, that sticker shock, because that's your one that you're trying to like sell instantly. You want to hit everyone with that sticker shock.
Sticker shocked. We're talking like the maximum price.
Yeah. You're going after that holy grail price. Wow.
I mean, I don't think I've pursued a toy like that. My thinking is just what I like, because I've got so many collectibles at this point. I categorize, and it's all what I like. I can't. I don't think I could afford that. The shock.
Yeah. I mean, there's people out there. They'll pay it.
I'll stick with the first two on occasion. All right, Jiggy. Can you strum us into our final segment of the episode? Hold up, where do you think you're going? There's one more thing we need to talk about. The ghastly fate of the Real Ghostbusters. That is to say, the actual destruction of the show from ABC and Q5. This is what we've been building up to all night, because we cannot not talk about ABC and Q5 regarding this show. Q5 is, what would you call them? A fix-it-up group? A group that comes in to make sure that your show performs poorly. A group that comes in to destroy everything that you've made so perfect, because it needs to be destroyed, because nothing should be that good. I think that's pretty much what their job was, because that's what they did. Past season 2, I hear more about how they destroyed it than I do about the show itself from the fans. And I'm sure you have a similar take on this. Am I right, Marky Mark?
Yeah, I mean, what would you call that? You call that a classic corporate takeover. Once a corporation gets their hooks onto something, they try to zap the juice out of it as much as possible. What happens when you take the juice out of something? You dry it out,
Oh, man. I mean, like, ABC's like, this show is doing great, guys. This show, like, the first 2 seasons knocked it out of the park. We're selling toys like hotcakes. This is like a top 10 Saturday morning production and then some. So we should probably ruin it. We should get everybody together and just start, like, taking it apart from what it really, just start, like, inserting, I don't know, like, Winston became the driver, and that's all his role was. I mean, he had an amazing role. Like, looking back, Winston here, he's the hero of the Sandman episode, and they made him just the driver. And Janine probably got the worst treatment out of all of them. I actually will not cover that in its entirety in this episode. I will give a quick shout out to my friend James Etok of the Serial Geek TV YouTube channel. He's got a video on this that breaks down everything that this horrible company did to Janine and everything that J. Michael Straczynski did trying to salvage her character when he wrote the episode, Janine, You've Changed. It's a great video. In summary, Janine was despunkified, Ray was slenderized, Winston became, again, just the driver, and Egon was mostly unchanged, but Peter's voice, now we're coming full circle. Peter's voice was replaced from the talented Lorenzo Music to Full House's Dave Coulier. Today, it has been made clear that it wasn't just Q5's doing. It was also the live-action version of Peter, Bill Murray. He was unhappy, and now this is reported on from Maurice LaMarche himself has mentioned this. Bill Murray was unhappy that he was being voiced by Garfield. In my personal opinion, he had a great range that went above and beyond the tone that he used for Garfield as Peter Venkman. Lorenzo hit much higher notes in his vocal performance. I was impressed. He was actually terrified at moments. There was a lot of stretching of his vocal performance. I know you said earlier that he was the voice of Garfield and it just made sense, but seriously, after binging some episodes, what is your take?
I mean, whether you're a kid or an adult, you instantly realize when someone changes a recipe. Mm-hmm. And when they changed, Peter Venkman's voice from Lorenzo Music, right? Lorenzo Music to Dave Coulier, you could tell. And not only did the voice slightly change, but like the attitude, it just felt a little different. And I love Dave Coulier. He used to have a show. What was that show on Nickelodeon? He used to have a weird show. It wasn't You Can't Do That on Television.
No, that was a Canadian show. I think that.
Well, yeah, Dave Coulier is Canadian.
Well, I meant that it was a show that eventually became a Nickelodeon show. But...
Yeah, I forgot what it was called. Wow, man, he used to do that famous "Cut It Out."
Well, he did that on Full House.
Yeah, he brought that over from that weird show that he had. It was a funky show. Yeah, it was a funky show that he had. And
I'm gonna look it up. Funky Dave Coulier show.
Yeah, I mean, just IMDb Dave Coulier, and I'm sure it'll show up. Now I'm curious. I'm gonna look it up. But yeah, so you could tell that like the recipe changed, but it comes down to. I mean, you said it best. They started changing everything. They started changing the essence of the characters. The story didn't feel original anymore. Like we're talking about, especially the first season, they're making that transition from film to cartoon, and then by the other seasons, it starts to feel like they're just going through the motions essentially, and the stories get wacky or they don't make sense, and it seems like it's just an engine that's still holding on just to help sell the toys.
I have a picture right here of Peter Venkman in the audience watching the Ghostbusters movie in their universe, talking about how Bill Murray doesn't look a thing like him.
Yeah, I was talking about. So they weren't the real ones. They doesn't look like me.
Yeah, he turns to his bros. He's like, "Hey, he doesn't look a thing like me."
Yeah. Oh, the name of the show is called Out of Control with Dave Coulier.
Okay, good to know. We're gonna look that up later, guys.
It's a weird show.
We're gonna look that up later. So, folks in the chat, Commotion Crew, what did you think of at least Venkman being replaced mid-show like that? How did that feel? Did you sense the change in personality that we sensed? That sort of like detached, complete breakdown of character where it's no longer the same. Because you put it best when you said that it felt different and you could feel the difference. I think you're very much correct on that part, Marky Mark. Okay, so friends in the live chat are leaving some comments. What do we have here? Mr. B-Man says, since the show died, does that mean it's coming back to haunt people? Well, I mean, it basically died after season 2, but it still had 7 seasons.
And then it had the spin-offs, the Slimer show.
Or are those considered in the same 7, or are those completely detached from the 7?
I don't know. I thought that was detached. It was a different animation style.
It was.
Yeah.
It was incredibly different. Cindy from Truly Outrageous 80s says, "Hey everyone."
Oh, I saw her episode. Yeah, she made me fall back in love with Jem.
Aw, Jem's a great character. Her show is amazing.
It's the only Barbie-like toy that I thought was rad.
It was truly outrageous.
It was truly outrageous. Truly.
Sherry Edgen thinks that the legal reasons was definitely a ha gotcha moment. Definitely could agree. Julian Murray says that he would call their jalopy in the other.
Hoopty.
Yeah, he would call the car from the Ghostbusters a hoopty. Tack the Artist Cat says there's a comic called The Savage Dragon. The creator wanted to call it just Dragon, and there was a magazine called that, so he put Savage in front of it. Yep.
Happens all the time, yeah.
Image Comics. Very true workaround here.
What's that? Larson, right? Eric Larson?
George Bueller says, I didn't notice the change in vocal performance that much, but the tone of the show definitely changed. Straczynski brought some darkness and big stakes to the show. He definitely did. In his writing, he kept it very serious. He didn't write down.
There's a line here on, speaking of IMDb, it says Q5 and by proxy then forced the writing staff and art department to make controversial changes to the series based on their own unstudied ideas in the hopes that they would make the show appeal to younger audiences. So that's essentially what you're battling, right? You're battling the success of the film and transitioning that to a younger audience, obviously to sell toys and to keep the brand alive. So then what happens when a corporation comes and, you let them take the wheel? They just want to keep sucking it dry, come up with, okay, how many more toys can we make? Well, make ones where they look like astronauts, make ones where they're monsters, or make one where they're skateboarding, and they just keep, beating a dead horse,
They wanted to get all the life out of it, and Straczynski was writing it with life. He was writing life into it. He cared about the writing.
And that happens. I mean, let's even say that Straczynski or Q5 was never involved. How long can something really last, though, at the end of the day, And that was Seinfeld's ultimate goal, why he cut it off while it was at its ultimate high. He stopped Seinfeld, the series, to end on a high note because he felt like, I was being offered so much money to go on with another season. But at the end of the day, he goes, I didn't want to get typecast or only be recognized for that work. But at the end of the day, it's like, I never wanted to become a show that basically jumped the shark,
Right. And, Straczynski wasn't the only writer that was trying to make it a decent quality show for everyone. It was, Craig Miller. They were all writing for the general Ghostbusters audience and not just to the kids. And like you said, it's just they came in and they wanted to milk it for all it's worth and just make generally acceptable, all around fun cartoon that would sell toys. And they didn't realize they already had that. They already had a gold mine and they just threw it away. But, like I said earlier, and compare it to what you just read, their entire purpose was to destroy what they already created to be so perfect.
Well, they wanted more money.
To destroy it.
Yeah, but I mean, that goes to show that whether they killed it or not, or the cartoon left, we got another rendition of the cartoon. We got the all-female Ghostbusters one.
We got
in
Extreme.
Film. At Extreme, where they introduced a handicapped or a person in a wheelchair as a Ghostbuster.
Now, we gotta say, in that show, it was basically a sequel to this show.
Yes, because Egon was still in it.
And there were episodes there was one in particular called Back in the Saddle, where they came back to, work as Ghostbusters collectively.
That's right. So yeah, I mean, the Ghostbuster spirit is alive and well, and it's obviously passed down to the hands of Reitman Jr. I'm sure. I mean, that's obviously not his name, but it's in the family. He did it justice with Afterlife, and I mean, it's just gonna keep going and going. You can't. Let's remember why Ghostbusters was created. It was because Dan Aykroyd, he's a big time believer in the occult in ghosts, in the paranormal. So that in itself is interesting, that this former SNL cast member went off to create this film with Reitman and others to fancy to like what's the word, to indulge his like interest in the occult, in the paranormal, and the strange.
And what I like most about the cartoon is that it took that depth of exploring the unknown and the strange and the unusual and made it all ages friendly, made it deep, and wrote beyond those big adventures that they had in the films.
Oh yeah. I mean, there was one episode where they busted the ghost from Christmas Past and Future.
Oh, yes. Xmas Marks the Spot is probably the greatest Christmas TV special I know of.
That was a trippy episode.
I love that Christmas special, and I'll probably end up having a video on at least the YouTube channel about that later on, as well as the Boogeyman episode. We're gonna be doing.
Love the Boogeyman. Love Sam Hain.
We're gonna be doing.
And it's a shame we never got toys of them.
It's strange too, because they're very toyetic.
I know.
But we're gonna get some bonus content on the channel and on the branded accounts for those things in a little while. The truth of the deal is that the show is really just 2 seasons long. I mean, technically.
It's foundation. Yeah.
Yes. I just as much as anybody hated what they did to the Busters as the series continued. But what we got in those first 2 seasons was the real deal. The Real Ghostbusters brought a cinematic quality to a serialized animated environment. And personally, I believe it allowed them to get away with more outlandish and exciting visual effects. To those of you who haven't really given this show a shot, it's hilarious, it's epic, it's fun, and it pays tribute to the source material perfectly. And while it's forging its own unique path as well. You have anything to add to that, Marqus?
Yes. We're talking about episodes, we're talking about characters, we're talking about the real film, and how obviously it's still near and dear to our hearts after all these years. But let's not forget the one thing that pumps you up. Not just the song by Ray Parker. That intro to the cartoon series, that intro is one of the best. It makes this guy come to life.
That's true. That's true. And there's some images in between where some video clips, interstitial stuff, where he comes in and he's like trying to get out of the circle and stuff. Oh man, what did he ever get a name? Do we know?
He had a name. I forgot what it was called. Yeah, it's referenced as something. I can't believe I forgot it, but it's not just the Ghostbusters logo or the Ghostbusters mascot. It does have a name or something like that.
You cannot beat that classic logo. And I actually was going to ask you, before we wrap things up, what is well, you've already mentioned a lot of favorites, but like, did you have a all-time favorite Real Ghostbusters episode, something nostalgic, something you're nostalgic for?
Moogly is his name, by the way. The ghost.
Oh, well, you're fast on that phone, man.
I'm fast.
I didn't even realize you were looking that up already. Wow.
I'm sorry, but yeah, in the process of doing that, I didn't hear your question.
Okay. What would you find to be like the most nostalgic aspect? Would it be the theme song? Anything on top of that?
The intro. Slimer, of course. They turned Slimer, who was a really gross.
They did.
And like, very quick cameo ghost in the film, because he had that whole scene, the ballroom scene.
He was the first they busted, so
yeah.
You get
and then he came out again at the end where all the ghosts were loose. He comes out of that, the hot dog car eating all the hot dogs.
Yeah, gotta check out Citizen Ghost to see how they transitioned him from that cameo ghost to their sidekick character.
Their mascot, yeah. It's cool that they chose, out of all things. You would think that maybe if they were going to go that route, they would have maybe took one of the terror dogs and domesticated it or something.
Well, I think the reason it makes sense is because he was based after John Belushi, I think it is.
That's what they were saying. They were trying to make the original Ghost based off John Belushi. That's right.
And
good. You're good.
Well, it just came to mind. I was thinking that Dan Aykroyd, that was his original partner, John Belushi. So him being based off of that character actually made a lot of sense to make him a part of their team.
Yeah, I think I even heard rumors that Chevy Chase was supposed to be part of the Ghostbusters or something like that.
I did not hear those rumors.
I heard that somewhere, but it would have never worked because Bill Murray and Chevy Chase, they hate each other. I think they even went to blows with one another.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, that's a whole different story.
Yeah.
Well, we've got to wrap this up now. Where can where can people find and support you online, and maybe even bombard you now with real Ghostbusters trivia?
Sure. I mean, look, Ghostbusters is my jam. Ghostbusters, Godzilla, Transformers, the movie, G.I. Joe, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Thundercats. I love all things 80s, even early 90s. But you can find me on Instagram at the Superqool.
With a Q, because it's cooler.
With a Q, that's right. And because of Marqus with a Q.
Because it's cooler.
It's cooler, that's right. And and once in a while we throw in a quiz, right? Quiz starts with Q, so it's trying to make sense there. But yeah, you can find me on Instagram at the Superqool with a Q. Or you could check me out on YouTube, which I would greatly appreciate. Like, share, subscribe. And that was just Superqool with a Q. I do a lot of toy reviews there. I do either what's called a super quick video. I keep it 15 minutes or less, where I'm just highlighting the item and moving it along, or I do something that's called a somewhat review, where it's part review and a lot of ranting. So yeah, check me out on YouTube, Superqool with a Q, or on Instagram, follow me at the Superqool with a Q.
Awesome. Rad-tastic. We have a lot of comments, and they just started popping up, and I'm like, oh boy. And here we are wrapping up the show. So I thank you so much for joining us, Marqus.
Yes, of course. Yeah, thank you for having me.
Radalicious ghost-busting goodness on this episode.
You say radalicious, I say fantabulous.
But they're both acceptable. And I want to say thanks bunches to everyone still in the live chat. You guys put the commotion in Cartoon Commotion. It wouldn't be the same without you. George Bueller saying, I didn't notice. Oh, no, we already got that. What is from Cast says, hey, what's up, guys? Hiya, what's up, from
my
Cast?
Dude?
Sherry Edgen says, thanks, just bits of information. Ghostbusters is one of my favorite shows. She watches it every President's Day. That's interesting.
All right.
Very interesting. George Bueller says, Mowgli is the ghost name,
and
he looked it up
that.
too.
Yeah.
He looked it up too.
There we go.
Marqus was just a wee bit faster.
Well, he's probably faster, maybe.
Callie Hawkins says, gotta see Jiggy. You might see him one more time before we end it.
You know what we should have did for this episode? A ghost version of Jiggy.
Oh boy. I don't think he's ready for that. What's from Cast says John B. as well as Eddie Murphy. I'm not sure what that's in response to. Sherry Edgen says, yeah, I heard about Chevy Chase.
Oh, yeah, that I think Eddie Murphy, before Winston, what's that actor's name? Ernie Hudson, before he came on board, I think there was rumors they were trying to get Eddie Murphy on board. He was hot in the 80s.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Right, because he also adds, but he could not while he was doing Beverly Hills Cop. Yeah.
And it's funny because Ernie Hudson tried to also play the voice in the cartoon, but instead it went to Arsenio Hall.
Wow. Yeah. And they did a good job. I think that, because they were contractually obligated to make it not like the films.
Yep.
There were differences they had to make to distinguish it from the films, like the hair on Egon.
Yeah.
There's a lot more we could add to this, but we do have to wrap it up.
Harold Ramis.
Thank you all for joining us, and keep it unreal, Commotion Crew. Did you enjoy that at all in the littlest bit? Well, guess what? I'm not asking you to spend a dime on this podcast. No sirree, Bob. All that I'm asking is that you give me like 20 seconds of your time to share this podcast episode with somebody who might like it. Just share it with anyone who might enjoy it because, friend, you were a part of this. You put the commotion in Cartoon Commotion. Much like our Patreon supporters, Eric Grant, Marsha Sullivan, Carrie Cube, Cade Utterback, and ToyStalker.com. And just in case you forgot in the last 60 minutes, this show is brought to you by the fine folks at the Cereal Box Network, cerealboxnetwork.com. Again, all I ask for your time here is a quick like and share to your social media platform of choice. There's literally a share button on everything. It doesn't take longer than 20 seconds, and every bit helps get the word out about this podcast. Now then, play us out, Jiggy.